The first time Rocky growled during a church service, people chuckled. It was a sunny Sunday morning in Willow Creek. The kind of morning that smelled like fresh cut grass and cinnamon rolls from the diner down the street. The pews were filled with smiling faces, kids squirming in their seats and in books flipping open. Pastor Eli stood at the altar with his usual gentle smile, holding his violin like it was a piece of heaven itself. But just as the first melancholic notes rang through the old wooden beams of Trinity Church, Rocky Officer Dana Brooks's loyal canine partner let out a low, guttural growl. The congregation turned. A few whispered. A kid giggled. Dana tugged gently at Rocky's leash. "Hey, boy, easy. It's just music." But Rocky wasn't playing. His hackles raised, his lips curled back, his eyes, always sharp and focused, locked straight onto the violin and Pastor Eli's hands. That's when the air changed. You could feel like something invisible had just crept into the room and taken a seat in the back pew. Nobody said much after the service. They just filed out politely, shaking Eli's hand as always. But Dana, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She knew Rocky better than anyone. He wasn't the kind of dog to react without reason. Certified for narcotic search and rescue, even crowd control, Rocky had served for 5 years without a single disciplinary incident. Calm, controlled, tactical. That growl, that wasn't a random reaction. It was a warning. The following Sunday, the same thing happened. And the Sunday after that, each time Pastor Eli played the violin, only during his solos, never during group hymns, Rocky would growl, not bark, not whimper, growl, like he was staring into something only he could see. Dana tried to laugh it off at first. She even checked the violin for drugs or explosive residue just in case. Nothing. Eli laughed with her and called it a quirky coincidence. But Dana noticed how quickly he tucked the instrument away after service, always locked in its case, always carried back to the vestry. She couldn't prove anything, but she started bringing Rocky to church every week just to see. And week after week, his reaction grew more intense. At one point, he pulled so hard on the leash that Dana had to anchor herself with her boots to the floorboards. It wasn't the music. It was something inside the sound. Willow Creek wasn't the kind of town that liked drama. People there still left doors unlocked, trusted their neighbors, and made pies for new residents. And no one embodied that sense of peace better than Pastor Eli. Kind eyes, soothing voice. A man who ran food drives, helped at shelters, and never forgot a birthday. But Rocky didn't care about any of that. He only cared about the violin. Dana finally confided in someone. Rita Morgan, the choir director who'd served at Trinity for nearly 2 decades. That violin. Rita blinked. He's had it forever. Says it was a gift, but I never heard him play it before the last year. Not once. Then all of a sudden, he starts closing every sermon with those sad little Zulos. You ever ask him why? Rita shrugged. He says it's for reflection. Said God speaks in silence between the notes. I thought it was sweet. A little dramatic maybe, but sweet. Dana frowned. Rocky's reaction didn't match. Sweet. That night at home, Dana queued up a recording of the last Sunday's service. She kept the leash nearby in case Rocky got anxious. She clicked play, the usual greetings, the prayer, the hymns, then the violin solo. Rocky was lying down, dozing, but as the notes played, his ears perked, his eyes opened, and that low growl returned, softer but unmistakable. Dana leaned in, heart pounding. Was it something in the frequency? She rewound, played it again. She couldn't hear anything strange, just haunting sad music. But Rocky reacted every time. If you've made it this far, you're clearly hooked on this mystery. Don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals, where brave dogs like Rocky show us just how powerful their instincts really are. Dana went to the church during off hours, said she was checking safety protocols. Eli didn't mind. He even showed her around, but when she casually asked to see the violin up close, something shifted behind his smile. "Oh, it's just an old thing," he said, patting the case. "Nothing special." But Rocky seemed to think otherwise. He laughed, but his eyes didn't. "I think your partner just has a flair for the dramatic." Dana nodded, smiling politely. But inside, she made a mental note. Get a warrant. Something about Eli's calmness felt rehearsed. Too smooth, too careful. As she walked out the vestry, Rocky stopped dead in his tracks and turned to stare back at the case. He didn't growl. He didn't bark, but he stared as if he was listening. And whatever he heard, it wasn't music. It had been 3 days since Officer Dana Brooks left Trinity Church with a pit in her stomach and a note scribbled in her mind. Get a warrant. But that was easier said than done. Pastor Eli wasn't just the spiritual heart of Willow Creek. He was its public darling. He served on the town council, volunteered with the Youth Baseball League, donated meals every Thanksgiving, accusing a man like him of what? Hiding something in a violin. It sounded insane. Dana knew that, and yet she kept seeing Rocky's reaction in her mind. Ears up, eyes locked, body tense, not aggressive, not scared, alert, as if his entire training had kicked in without a command. So she started where all real investigations begin. Records. Willow Creek didn't have a proper archives building, but the public library kept a back room with yellowing newspapers and dusty microfiche files. Dana slipped in after her shift, scanned the town obituaries, event clippings, and church newsletters. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until she found something odd. An article from 2001 ST. Joseph's Home for Girls closes its doors after 47 years. The place was 2 counties over, shut down for financial reasons, the paper claimed. But Dana's gut told her there was more. Then one line caught her eye. Pastor Eli Morton, formerly a youth counselor at ST. Joseph's, could not be reached for comment. Formerly. She stared at the name. That's not on his resume. Not in the church bios. Not in the town's election records. Why hide it? Dana copied the article and went home, thoughts spinning. That night, she pulled out her laptop and searched online for anything on St. Joseph's Home for Girls. Almost nothing. No lawsuits. No survivor speaking out. Just one anonymous blog post from 2014. He played the violin while we cried. No name, no detail, just that line. Dana's skin prickled. The next day, she called in a favor from her friend Camila Torres, a forensic audio analyst at the State Crime Lab. Cam, I need you to listen to something. Weird request, I know, but I think there's something off in a violin solo. There's this undertone. My K9 partner reacts to it every time. Camila blinked on the other end of the Zoom call. You think there's a hidden frequency? Maybe. Or a sound too subtle for humans to pick up, but not dogs. Send it over. I'll run a spectrum analysis. But Dana, just a heads up, dogs sometimes react to overtones we can't hear. Doesn't always mean foul play. I know, but I trust Rocky more than I trust half my squad. That evening, Dana sat by the fireplace with Rocky curled up beside her, the violin recording played on repeat from her phone. Each time Rocky's ears perked. He didn't growl anymore, just listened like the music was saying something only he could understand. She looked down at him. What do you hear, buddy? Rocky lifted his head, eyes meeting hers with that steady K9 gaze, silent, loyal, haunted. 2 days later, Camila called back. You were right, she said. There's something buried under the music, barely detectable, but when I isolated the frequencies, you won't believe this. There's a rhythmic, almost spoken pattern beneath the melody. Dana's heart stopped like a voice, not a clear one. It's muffled, warped, maybe distorted by the violin's resonance, but I ran it through several filters. One section repeats. It's faint, but I swear it sounds like a child saying, "Stop, please stop." Dana's throat went dry. You sure? I can send you the waveform. You'll need high-end headphones to catch it, but it's there. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she filed an affidavit to request a search warrant. It was shaky, built on hunches, K9 responses, and a spectral analysis of a violin track. But it was something. She leaned into the forensic audio and the sealed history of ST. Joseph's. By Friday, a county judge signed it. Saturday morning, the church was empty. Pastor Eli was at a conference in Denver. Donna used the opportunity to bring a small team, 2 deputies, an evidence tech, and Rocky. The vestry was dimly lit and smelled of old leather and incense. Dana moved slowly, respectful. She wasn't here to burn down reputations. She was here for truth. Rocky walked ahead, tail stiff, ears focused. He stopped in front of a tall armwire where the violin case rested, and then he barked loud, sharp twice. Donna opened the armwire, unlatched the case. There it was, the violin, smooth, polished, beautifully preserved. She lifted it out and turned it over. Normal weight, normal construction, except it wasn't. Rocky began pawing at the bottom of the case. Dana took a closer look. The velvet lining was worn, but something was off about the stitching. She pulled out a small blade and cut carefully along the seam. It peeled back like skin. Inside was a false compartment, and in it, photos, dozens of them. Old faded snapshots of girls ages 6 to 12. Some smiling, some mid-cry. One had a bruised cheek. Beneath the photos were folded letters, drawings. One said, "Tell Mom I'm okay." Another had a tiny heart sticker with the word safe written in shaky handwriting. At the very bottom, a child silver locket engraved to Ellie. "Love, Mom." Dana stepped back, covering her mouth. Rocky sat down beside her, quiet, watching. And then, as if on cue, the violin slipped from her hand and hit the ground with crack. It didn't sound like wood breaking. It sounded like a scream. The next day, the town woke to sirens outside the church. Eli was taken in at the airport. News broke quickly. Locals were stunned, angry. Some refused to believe it. Others just wept. Dana gave a statement to the press. "All we had was a dog and a feeling," she said, "but sometimes that's enough." Back at home, she sat with Rocky on the porch, the sun setting behind them. She scratched his ears. "You never stopped listening, did you?" Rocky leaned into her hand, and for the first time in days, he slept. Willow Creek was the kind of town where people waved from their porches, and kids rode bikes without helmets. The biggest headlines used to be things like "Mayor slips on ice at bake sale" or "School board approves new lunch menu." That changed overnight. By Sunday morning, the church parking lot was full, not with worshipers, but with reporters, tripods, satellite vans, microphones shoved toward anyone in uniform. People stood behind police tape in disbelief, whispering with coffee cups clutched tight. And Dana Brooks, who'd never liked the spotlight, stood in front of all of it, tried to explain what they'd found. She kept it simple. "We received a lawful warrant to search Trinity Church following a series of behavioral alerts from a certified K-9 officer during weekly services. The investigation led to the discovery of hidden photographs, personal belongings of minors, and objects linked to several unsolved disappearances from the 1990s. Our suspect is in custody and cooperating." But the truth wasn't simple, and neither was what came next. By Monday, Eli Morton's photo was on every local and regional news outlet. Not the smiling head shot from church bulletins, but the mug shot, blank eyes, hollow cheeks. A man who'd been called pastor for 20 years now carried a different title. Suspect in ongoing child exploitation case. It didn't matter that he hadn't been formally charged yet. Public judgment came fast. Dana knew how this worked. Half the town wouldn't believe it, no matter the evidence. The other half wouldn't stop calling for blood, but she didn't care about the noise. She cared about the names, the ones they hadn't spoken yet. That's where Special Agent Ree came in. A sharp Tanj, non-nonsense investigator from the FBI's Crimes Against Children Division. He showed up with a pair of black boots, an iron handshake, and a quiet promise. "We're going to do this right." They started identifying the items. The locket belonged to Ellie Chambers, a girl who'd vanished from a group home in 1999. The crayon drawings matched letters from foster files at the now-defunct ST, Joseph's Home for Girls. The photos, though aged and low-res, matched several missing persons bulletins filed over a decade ago. Each time they found a match, Dana felt her gut twist. Each time, Rocky sat close, almost protective, like he knew this wasn't over. The breakthrough came midweek in the form of a phone call. "Hi, my name is Claire. Claire Iyer Benton. I think I know what that violin is." Dana was at her desk running on 4 hours of sleep and cold coffee. She straightened up. "I'm listening." Claire's voice trembled. "I saw the picture on the news. That's his violin. He used to play it when we were locked in the quiet room." Dana didn't speak. I was 10 at St. Joseph's. He wasn't a pastor back then. He was a counselor. Real calm, real friendly. Said music could heal pain. But he didn't use it that way. What did he do, Claire? He played while the doors were shut, while we cried. That sound, it was like a lullaby you couldn't wake up from. And then he'd stop and open the door. Dana felt something shift in her chest. It wasn't just revulsion. It was sorrow, the kind that settles deep like smoke after fire. Claire, would you be willing to make a formal statement? There was silence on the other end, then a whisper. Yes, but only if Rocky's there. The interview took place in a small private room at the station. Claire Benton walked in wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a scarf in her hands. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in years, like the trauma had left fingerprints on her bones. But when Rocky entered, she smiled. Same eyes, she said, gentle but sharp. Rocky walked up, sniffed gently, then curled up at her feet as if saying, You're safe now. Claire told him everything. How Eli, then known simply as Mr. Morton, was trusted by the nuns. How he volunteered extra hours, offered to counsel the troubled girls. How he would isolate them in a quiet room, a soundproof basement chamber with no windows and only one chair. And always the violin. He said music could teach obedience. She said, but it wasn't music. It was control that sounded that it made me forget who I was. She pointed to the case files. Some of those girls, they never came back from quiet time. He said they were transferred, but I know better. I felt it. With Claire's statement, the case opened wide. More women came forward, some anonymous, some brave enough to show their faces. Each story different, but threaded by one haunting similarity. The sound of that violin. The media dubbed it the violin case. And while Dana hated the sensationalism, she understood its power. For every headline, another survivor stepped into the light. And through it all, Rocky remained at her side. Calm, watchful hero. By the end of the week, Dana walked into a middle school auditorium packed with families, teachers, and town leaders. They'd gathered for what the mayor called a night of healing. Dana didn't want to speak, but when someone handed her the mic and the crowd hushed, she thought of Rocky and of Claire. And of all the voices that had been silenced, she stepped forward. This case didn't start with evidence. It didn't start with suspicion. It started with a dog, a partner, who refused to ignore the sound of suffering. She looked toward the back where Rocky sat calmly, ears perked. He listened when no one else would. And because of him, a truth buried for decades has come to light. Applause filled the room. Not the usual polite clapping, but something raw, emotional, real. And somewhere near the front row, Claire wiped a tear from her cheek. Later that night, as Dana walked Rocky back to the cruiser, she paused to look up at the stars. Still not done, are we? Rocky just wagged his tail, because there were still more names to find, more doors to unlock. But at least now the town had started listening. And for the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't winning. By the second Sunday after Pastor Eli's arrest, the doors of Trinity Church stayed closed for the first time in 52 years. There were no hymns, no violin solos, just silence. But silence, Dana Brooks had learned, wasn't peace. It was tension. It was denial. It was a slow, seething kind of rage. Not from the victims, but from the town. Not everyone wanted the truth. It started small, cold stars at the grocery store, half-whispered prayers at the gas pump. One afternoon, Dana caught Mrs. Alder, Eli's elderly neighbor, scrubbing the pastor's sign off his mailbox, muttering, "This town's gone to hell." By Tuesday, someone left a note under Dana's windshield. "We don't tear down our own here. He saved my family. You're being used." She tossed it into the glove box without a word. But it stung because Willow Creek wasn't just a dot on a map. It was her home, the place where she'd learned to drive, graduated high school, buried her father. These weren't strangers. They were her neighbors. The resistance ramped up fast. That week, Dana received a formal request from the town council to suspend further public commentary regarding the ongoing case, citing preservation of communal stability. She knew what that meant. Back off. Stop talking. But she wasn't alone. Special Agent Reese stood his ground, and so did Claire Benton and the handful of other survivors who had stepped forward. Still, the town was split. Every interview aired on TV brought more scorn. Some folks claimed it was all manufactured. Others said Dana had planted the items in the violin case. A few even hinted that Rocky had been trained to react. That was the one that hurt the most. Rocky, who had served during tornado rescues, found overdose victims, and helped locate a missing toddler in under 4 hours, was now being called a media prop. "You okay?" Camila Torres asked over phone one night. "Yeah," Dana lied. "Just tired." There was a long pause. "You're not alone in this. You know, the data is solid. The waveform doesn't lie. Doesn't matter. People don't want to see data. They want to see halos on the heads of their heroes." Another silence. "Well then," Camila said gently, "maybe it's time they saw the horns, too." Meanwhile, the investigation took a new turn. Agent Rhea uncovered that Eli had worked as a traveling counselor for 3 other youth organizations between 2003 and 2007, all under different state contracts. Most of the files were buried under nonprofit restructuring and vague HR policies. But one record jumped out. A missing girl in 2006, Julia Ray, age 9, last seen in a church-sponsored summer program. Dana stared at the photo. Big brown eyes, braided hair, wide smile, the kind of face that made your heart ache. The kicker, the camp was located just 2 hours away, and the violin case had a sticker on the underside with a partially faded address that matched the church hosting the camp. Too specific to ignore. That Friday, Dana drove out to the old campgrounds with Rocky in the back seat. The place was abandoned now. Chipped paint, broken benches, overgrown trails, but the cabin numbers were still visible. She walked the grounds, Rocky at her side. It felt like walking through someone else's memory. Then Rocky froze. Cabin number 6. His nose went to the ground. He circled, stopped, whined, then scratched at the dirt beneath the windowsill. Dana knelt, brushed away leaves there, half buried under a broken floorboard. She found it, a silver hair barrette shaped like a butterfly, and the initials scratched on the back. Junior back at the station. She logged the item into evidence and called Julia's mother, now living in Kentucky. The woman sobbed on the phone, saying, "She wore that every day." I begged them to investigate back then. No one would listen, but now they were listening, and the violin, once a symbol of calm, had become a war drum for justice. That weekend, someone egged Dana's mailbox. The next morning, the word lie was scrolled and read across her driveway. She wasn't surprised. What did surprise her was a message she got that night, handwritten, taped to her door. "I believe you. I was 12. I remember the quiet room. 2. If you still have that dog, I'd like to meet him." It was unsigned. Dana took the note inside, read it again, and whispered, "We're not done yet, are we?" Rocky wagged his tail slowly as if saying, "No, we're just getting started." By the following Wednesday, FBI headquarters launched a national task force to reopen all abuse complaints tied to defunct group homes between 1995 and 2010. Rocky's behavioral alert was included in their formal case study as an example of canine-based trauma detection. For Dana, it was a small validation, but for Claire and the other survivors, it was life-changing. "I thought no one would believe me," Claire said during a community support group. "But that dog knew the truth before I could say it. And because of him, I can finally breathe." That night, Dana and Rocky returned to Trinity Church, not to search, but to reflect. The town was quiet, too quiet, the kind that comes not from peace, but from shame. Inside the sanctuary, the altar was bare, the pews were empty. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, casting colored light over floorboards. Dana sat in the front row. Rocky lay beside her, chin resting on his paws. She took a deep breath. "I don't care if they hate me. I just care that we got to the truth." Rocky thumped his tail once. Outside, the wind picked up, and somewhere in the distance, the faintest sound of a violin string snapped in the wind. The town of Willow Creek was still in denial. 2 weeks had passed since the arrest of Pastor Eli Morton, And though national coverage had begun spotlighting the case, the local community remained fractured. Lawn signs with phrases like, "We stand with Eli," appeared in front yards. Others quietly took down crosses from their walls. But inside the state capitol building, things were changing fast. The FBI task force created in response to Rocky's alert had flagged 24 closed group homes across 5 states. Homes where Eli had either consulted, volunteered, or guest lectured over past 30 years. The scope of the case was now national. Dana was no longer just a small-town cop. She was part of something much bigger, and she hated every second of it. Not because she didn't believe in justice, but because justice was slow. Too slow. Agent Reed called her late one night. "You need to come to headquarters. We found something. Something big." That morning, Dana packed up Rocky and drove 4 hours to the federal lab. The moment she stepped into the conference room, she knew it wasn't going to be good. Laid out across the table were a dozen mini cassette tapes, old-school dictaphone style, found in a locked strong box recovered from a church property Eli had once helped manage in Kansas. Camila Torres was there too, already analyzing audio files. Her expression was grim. "We've identified 8 voices so far. Children, girls, ages roughly between 6 and 13. The tapes are interviews of sorts." "Interviews?" Dana asked. Camila's voice cracked. "More like recordings of forced confessions, shame tactics, guilt, manipulation. And over every single one, we can hear that violin playing softly in the background." Dana's hands clenched into fists. He recorded them. He recorded everything. And he buried the tapes where no one would think to look. For the next 6 hours, Dana sat in the darkened audio room and listened to 5 tapes. She heard little girls sobbing, whispering that they were bad, that they deserved punishment. She heard Eli's calm voice guiding them to confess, telling them that music is God's forgiveness and that obedience brings peace. In one recording, a girl begs to go home. The only response is a violin chord. Soft, slow, deliberate. Dana had to step outside and throw up in the parking lot. Rocky stood beside her the entire time, head pressed against her thigh, unmoving. The next morning, Dana received a sealed brown envelope from Agent Reed. Inside was a summary sheet from the Department of Justice. It listed names of Eli's verified victims, ages, last known group home, recovery status. At the bottom, a note, total identified victims. 19. Dana read the number 3 times. Then she flipped the page over. There was a section titled Unknown Female, subject file Donna Bluebird. This victim had never been reported. She had no name, but one of the tapes labeled Bluebird featured her voice at least 5 times. It was the clearest voice in all the recordings. She spoke softly, sometimes sang lullabies, and once recited a poem about wanting to fly away. Dana replayed the snippet. "My name doesn't matter. Just call me Bluebird. I like that better. Bluebirds don't stay in cages." Camila had enhanced the audio. The girl's voice was tender, heartbreakingly innocent. No file, no name, no body, but Dana couldn't forget her. She carried that voice like a splinter in her soul. Back in Willow Creek, the community began to crack. 2 more local residents stepped forward, claiming they'd witnessed weird moments over the years. Eli locking the vestry after service, burning boxes of documents in the woods behind the church, isolating certain teens during summer trips. None of it was enough for charges on its own, but the pieces were forming a shape now, and not even the most faithful followers could deny it anymore. That week, Dana met again with Claire Benton. She played her one of the recovered tapes, only a portion. Claire froze when she heard the violin. "That's her," Claire said. "Who?" "Bluebird. She was in the room next to mine. They never let her outside, but I heard her sing sometimes. She made up little songs. She was kind, always said I'd be okay." Dana leaned forward. "Do you know her name?" "No." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "But I remember she had a ribbon in her hair, blue like the sky. That's why she called herself Bluebird." Dana stared at the photo wall in the station. 24 young faces pinned under a handwritten banner. "The voices we failed." She knew one more belonged there. She just didn't know who. As pressure mounted, The district attorney began working with the FBI to assemble a sweeping list of charges: child endangerment, unlawful imprisonment, psychological abuse, and conspiracy to obstruct federal investigations. The FBI wanted to try Eli in federal court, citing interstate crimes and trafficking of minors. But Dana had her eyes set on one final piece of justice. She wanted to find Bluebird. She went back to the original church where the violin was first. Found this time, she brought Rocky alone. She let him off leash and gave him one word: search. Rocky moved with purpose, sniffed every room, took the stairs like he owned the place. Then he stopped outside a small prayer closet, one that had been locked during the original search. Dana forced the door open. Dust, old hymnals, candles, and in the corner, something barely visible. A drawing scratched into the back wall, nearly faded. It was a crude image of a bird in a cage, door open. Beneath it, the words, "Fly, Bluebird, fly." Dana stared, frozen. She reached into her pocket and took out the printed waveform of Bluebird's voice. She folded it gently, placed it beneath the drawing, and whispered, "We hear you now." Rocky wed softly. They stood there for several minutes. That night, Dana logged the discovery as supplemental evidence, but in her own private notes, she wrote something else. There may never be a face to put with her name, but the world will know she existed. She mattered. Her voice, however faint, changed everything. And maybe that was enough. The next day, Rocky received an official commendation from the governor's office. Media outlets ran headlines like K9 uncovers trail of abuse hidden for decades. The dog who heard what no one else could. Heroes for animals. Meet Rocky, the dog who exposed a monster. Dana stood beside him during the ceremony, hand resting on his harness. She said nothing to the cameras. But afterward, as they climbed into the cruiser, she looked at Rocky and smiled. "We did good, partner, but I don't think it's over yet." Rocky wagged his tail because in the distance, the wind still carried a song, and some music never aids. The courthouse in Jackson County hadn't seen a crowd like this in years. Media vans lined the street. Victims, supporters, protesters, and silent bystanders pressed together on the courthouse steps like grains in a tight jar. But inside Courtroom 3B, the mood was nothing like the chaos outside. Inside, it was cold, quiet, and heavy with a tension that felt almost sacred. Pastor Eli Morton stood before the judge with hands clasped, no longer wearing a white collar, just a gray prison jumpsuit and the pale, weathered face of a man who knew he'd lost control of the narrative. For the first time, the violin was silent. Dana Brooke sat in the second row of the gallery, in full uniform, Rocky lying at her feet. He was calm like always, but his eyes were locked on Eli, watchful as if still waiting for one final move. The prosecution opened with a wall of evidence, recovered tapes, photos, audio analyses, survivor testimony, DNA matches on personal belongings. What followed was days of witness accounts. Grown women, some trembling, some composed, took the stand and finally spoke what they kept locked away for decades. Claire Benton was the third to testify. She walked up to the stand, shoulders straight, but jaw tight. "I was told it wasn't abused because there were no bruises, but bruises fade. What he left behind, it still aches every night." She paused. "When he played that violin, he thought it made him powerful. But you know who was the real hero? That dog. That dog who heard the cries we couldn't say out loud." Rocky lifted his head. Several people turned to look. Claire smiled through her tears. "I owe him my voice." On the 6th day of the trial, the FBI's audio team played portions of Tape the Bluebird. The courtroom held its breath. Even the judge leaned forward. A little girl's voice crackled to life. Soft, trembling. "My name doesn't matter. Just call me Bluebird. I like that better. Bluebirds don't stay in cages." Someone in the gallery sobbed. Dana closed her eyes and mouthed a quiet promise. "We didn't forget you." Rocky wed gently, then rested his head on her boot. The defense tried everything. Mental instability, childhood trauma, religious delusion. None of it stuck. Eli refused to testify. When asked if he wanted to speak before sentencing, he shook his head. The judge looked him square in the eye. "You use music to cover pain." You use God's name to silence children. You will not silence them anymore. He was sentenced to 140 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. But for Dana, it wasn't about the number. It was about the silence that followed. This time, it wasn't fear. It was relief. Outside the courthouse, dozens gathered. Survivors held hands. Some cried, some laughed. A few stood quietly with photos of the girls who were never found. Claire approached Dana and knelt beside Rocky. "Can I?" she asked, reaching toward his head. "Of course," Dana said. Claire ran her hand gently over Rocky's fur. "I never got to say thank you before." Rocky licked her hand once. "You listened," she whispered. "You really listened." In the weeks that followed, a movement grew. The Bluebird Initiative was launched, an advocacy and survivor support network named after the unidentified voice that had echoed through the tapes. Donations poured in. Counseling centers were funded. New laws were proposed requiring trauma response training in group homes and institutions. And Dana, she was promoted to special investigations, offered a desk, a bigger office, but she declined. "Belong on the ground," she said with him. She looked down at Rocky, where the real work happens. One Saturday morning, several months later, Dana and Rocky returned to Trinity Church, now converted into a trauma healing center. It still looked like a church, but the inside had been stripped of pews, stained glass, and the pulpit. In their place, bookshelves, soft lights, and an open circle of chairs. A small group was gathered. Survivors and families, local volunteers, a counselor or two. Dana stepped into the middle with Rocky at her side. "I used to think you had to wait for permission to speak," she said. "That justice started with paperwork. But the truth, sometimes it starts with a bark." Laughter rose gently. Rocky didn't understand evidence. He didn't understand politics. He just knew something was wrong, and he didn't stop until someone listened. She looked around the circle. "If you're here today, it's because you were brave enough to speak or brave enough to listen." She paused. "I'm here to say thank you for doing both." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long gold shadows over grass, Dana and Rocky sat together on a park bench, a plate of ribs balanced on her knee. Rocky, ever the gentleman, waited for permission. "Go ahead, champ," she said, offering a bone. "You earned it." He took it gently and settled in with a satisfied sigh. A few kids played nearby. A breeze rustled the trees. Dana leaned back and closed her eyes. This wasn't closure. There was no such thing, but there was peace. And sometimes that was enough. To everyone who's followed Rocky's story, from the very first growl in the pews to the final verdict in court, thank you. We told this story not just for justice, but for truth, for the voices who couldn't speak, for the ones who still haven't been heard. And now we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed something you couldn't explain? Something that didn't make sense to others, but you knew deep down was real? What did you do? What would you do? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.